How you going, guys? Southeastern Australia is a significantly important area for Australia's agricultural sector, growing a wide variety of crops, livestock, and dairy. The region includes some of the key agricultural areas of Australia, such as the Murray-Darling Basin, where approximately two-fifths of Australia's agricultural production value is yielded. However, this important region is under serious threat from climate change, with increased heat waves and global warming. Farmers are also under threat due to their dependence on agriculture, as continual reduction in the yields from crops and other agricultural processes puts serious strain on the farmers and how they make a living, which obviously will cause mental health problems and has a self-fortifying vicious cycle as well, where making less money from products results in having less money to input to the product or saving the products, such as crops. And then without that input money, we lose value in the crops, and then it's just a repeat. So, southeastern Australia has already seen the devastating impacts of an evolving climate. The annual average temperatures for the 1990 to 2009 period serves as the baseline, and they stood at 12.7 degrees Celsius. Prior to that, there was an increase of 0.84 degrees Celsius between 1910 to 1930 in the baseline. 2019 was the hottest observed year. It had the hottest maximum temperature with an annual average of 0.9 degrees Celsius higher than the baseline, which is, nearly as much as we've seen in 100 years. So it stood as the hottest average temperature recorded, which is highlighting the region's warming climate. During this time period of 1990 to 2009, there was an average increase of 1.47 degrees Celsius, give or take 0.24 degrees Celsius. Australia has gone through notable climate change-induced events, such as Cyclone Larry in 2006, that decimated 90% of the banana crop in northern Queensland, resulting in a 500% increase in the price of bananas. The 2009 heat wave that punished fruit crops in Victoria, and also there's heat waves and droughts, which we will talk a little bit more about later on. Alrighty, so heat waves directly impact crop production and can lead to problems such as heat stress. When a plant or crop gets heat stress, their growth is heavily stunted as they dehydrate. The extreme heat can hamper a range of physiological processes in plants, such as photosynthesis rate, and can also lead to an increased water loss through transpiration. Crops in Australia, such as wheat, barley, canola, grapes, and apples, are all especially vulnerable to changes in this tolerable heat range. It's those that can really help highlight the gravity of the impact on Australia's agriculture, as cereal crops, which is our wheat and barley, are the most valuable production by commodity, standing at 23% of Australia's total value for the 2022 to 2023 period. Oilseeds, which is canola, the second most valuable grain, only beaten by cattle, which is the second in total. And oilseeds came in at 7% again in that 2022 to 2023 period. And fruits, being our grapes and apples, are also at 7% again in this 2022 to 2023 period. All right, livestock, including cattle, sheep, and poultry, are also very vulnerable to heat waves or hotter climates in general. They're also affected by heat stress, and it's just as harmful in livestock as it is towards the plants. It significantly reduces quality of life, and animals do unfortunately suffer during these hotter weather events. No farmer, consumer, or person really wants to support any product where an animal's been suffering. We all care pretty deeply about the quality of life for our livestock in the Australian agricultural scheme, which alone is pretty upsetting and concerning when we consider the upwards trends for our increasingly hot environment and climate. Specific to agricultural impacts, though, heat stress causes livestock to reduce their intake and sometimes even refuse feed at all, which greatly impacts the livestock's health. It can stunt growth. In cattle, it seriously hinders milk production, which affects the dairy side of agriculture. And livestock also face reduced fertility and birth rates, which poses threats for our long-term economic production for farmers. A closely related and often connected event to heat waves are consequential droughts. Droughts are defined as extended periods where there is not enough water available to supply for the needs of the area. Heat waves and droughts are often linked as the hotter temperatures dry out the soil and increase evaporation, causing a significant issue as crops and livestock are already struggling to stay hydrated and functioning during the heat wave alone, let alone with limited water available. As I said earlier, we touch on it. The 2017 to 2022 drought is a notable event that devastated farmers during the worst drought in recorded history since the 1820s. During the drought, farm gross domestic profit was reduced by 29% roughly from 2017 to 2020, and production declined by 17% across the 2016 to 17, 18 to 19, 19 to 20 periods. Cereal grains were significantly impacted, and farmers resulted in feeding livestock with non-traditional crops due to the high price of traditional feed, ultimately impacting the Australian agricultural scene even more as rural exports declined by 18% from 2017 to 2020. And some grains were imported for the first time since 2007. These long periods of drought also do not help the bushfire scene as bushfire season is greatly increased. All right, what can be done? Workers in the agricultural field can adopt a few strategies to prevent negative impacts, and with agriculture contributing roughly 13% of Australia's total emissions and another 9% being attributed to deforestation, it is vital that some action is taken not only for the conservation of farm productivity and livestock well-being, but also to help reduce the impacts of the agricultural sector as a whole. Unfortunately, there is no quick fix for heat waves or an increasingly hot climate, and it's not really going anywhere. But there are some strategies that we can use to prepare for these catastrophes. One of the simplest steps is the protection of upper strata, canopy and shade providing vegetation in paddocks for livestock for them to graze and rest under. Heat stress is an inevitable condition of an increasing temperature. However, lying in a cool place out of direct sunlight requires a lot less energy and significantly more comfort that will maintain better levels of productivity. Planting vegetation clumps not only provides shade for livestock, but also maintains the natural carbon sinks as they utilise and store carbon. One method to minimise agricultural impacts during heat-induced drought is zero tillage. Normal tillage is a process of soil disturbance by using tillage machinery to turn over the soil. Traditionally, this was useful as it killed weeds, removed plant residue from previous crops, and provided a designated depth of soft soil for planting. However, it completely destroys the soil structure, leaving it vulnerable to erosion by all vectors. Zero tillage utilises small discs on machinery rather than the big ploughs, creating minimal soil disturbance. The insignificant disturbances made are only wide enough for the seeds to be deposited and covered with soil. During drought events, dry soils are threatened by erosion that results in crop destruction. However, zero tillage methods improve soil structure as soil retains the organic matter and surface residue, nutrients, and water. Not only does this prevent agricultural impacts of drought, but also prevents the release of large amounts of carbon from organic matter that are released in traditional tillage methods. Planting a variety of crops in combination with traditional crops or as a whole new product can help farmers to keep an income during drought. Whilst heat waves and drought are destructive to nearly all crops, farmers can diversify what crops they've grown to spread risk across a large number of different species that are suited to the warmer conditions, we could just say not putting all their eggs in one basket. And finally, precision irrigation systems allow for minimal water loss or runoff that occurs when doing the widespread spraying of crop fields. The precision irrigation system utilises input data such as what the plant needs, the spacing of the plants, how big the paddock is, and through this it can supply the appropriate amount of water, how many mils it needs, and it will do so at an appropriate time of day, such as dawn or dusk when heat isn't such a big problem.